I've lived in this sleepy little town for over 20 years now. My name is Martha Grayson and I'm what most people would call an old soul. The days pass quietly here in Camden, Maine, between tending to my garden, knitting scarves that no one really needs anymore, and taking long walks with Max, my golden retriever. It's a simple life, but it suits me just fine. People around town don't ask too many questions about me. They assume I'm just another widow scraping by on social security checks. And honestly, I prefer it that way. Let them think what they want. What they don't know won't hurt them or me. Then there's Clara Bennett. She moved into the house next door last year with her husband Greg and their 2 kids. From the moment she arrived, she made it clear she didn't belong here. Not in this quiet corner of the world where nothing exciting ever happens. Every weekend their backyard turns into some kind of circus. Loud music, expensive cars pulling up, laughter echoing late into the night. Once I saw Clara scrolling through her phone while wearing sunglasses bigger than her face. That's when I knew we'd never be friends. So I tried to keep things civil. Until the day she called me a poor old woman, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Oh Claire, if only you knew. It all started innocently enough. One afternoon I was sitting on my porch talking to Victor Langley, an old friend from London who helps me manage certain assets. We were discussing security protocols for my digital holdings when I dropped my phone right at Clara's doorstep. Of course she picked it up. Of course she peeked at the screen. And of course she couldn't resist saying something snide when she saw the numbers flashing across the wallet app. "Oh Martha," she said with that fake sweetness she uses so well. "I didn't realize poor old ladies like you could afford such fancy gadgets." Little did she know those fancy gadgets held more zeros than she'd probably seen in her entire life. After that incident, Clara began acting strange. At first, it was subtle. A glance over the fence as I watered my roses. A question about how I managed to pay for repairs on my roof last winter. But then came the prying. She'd stop by unannounced, pretending to borrow sugar or chat about the weather. But her eyes always wandered. To my mailbox, to my windows, even to Max's doghouse. I wasn't born yesterday. I knew exactly what she was after. So I played dumb. After all, letting someone like Clara Bennett believe she has the upper hand can be its own kind of weapon. One morning I found my car tampered with. The brake line cut clean through. Thankfully, I noticed before driving anywhere. Whoever did it wanted to send a message, though I wasn't sure yet whether it came from Clara or someone else entirely. Around the same time I started receiving anonymous texts. "Keep your mouth shut, you're being watched," and once simply, "Sell now." It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Richard taught me how to handle situations like this. He always said, "Martha, money makes you powerful but secrets make you dangerous." I wasn't about to let anyone take either away from me. Clara's curiosity turned into obsession. One evening I caught her snooping around my property while Greg and the kids were out. She froze like a deer in headlights when she saw me standing there with Max growling softly beside me. "Just admiring your flowers," she stammered, but her hands were trembling. I smiled sweetly and told her not to worry. They weren't worth stealing anyway. Inside, however, my heart raced. This wasn't just nosiness anymore. Something darker was brewing and I needed to stay 10 steps ahead. Clara enlisted help from her tech-savvy brother Ethan. I could tell because suddenly my internet connection slowed to a crawl, and my devices started behaving oddly. They thought they were clever, hacking into my systems without leaving traces. But Richard had prepared me for worse. Every device I owned was protected by layers of encryption and fail-safes designed to alert Victor instantly if breached. When Clara finally confronted me again demanding answers about the $5 million in Bitcoin, I laughed in her face. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," I told her. For once she looked genuinely afraid. Not long after Clara's failed attempt to intimidate me, strangers began lurking near my house. Men in dark SUVs parked down the street, pretending to read newspapers. Others loitered outside the local cafe watching every move I made. These weren't amateurs. They were professionals sent by someone desperate to get their hands on my assets. Whoever they worked for clearly didn't understand that threatening me wouldn't work. If anything, it only strengthened my resolve. I contacted Victor immediately and together we devised a plan to flush them out. The game was about to get very interesting. While I dealt with external threats, Clara's personal life began unraveling. Greg grew increasingly frustrated with her fixation on my supposed fortune. "Why can't you leave that old lady alone?" he snapped one night during yet another argument. Their fights spilled into the streets, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I felt sorry for her kids, caught in the crossfire of their parents' crumbling marriage. Part of me wondered if Clara realized how much damage her greed was causing, not just to others but to herself. Maybe someday she'd learn. Or maybe not. On a stormy evening, Clara took matters into her own hands. While I walked Max, she broke into my house searching for proof of my wealth. Instead, she stumbled upon a locked safe hidden behind a painting of Richard and me. Inside were documents detailing his involvement in early cryptocurrency development, and evidence linking him to a controversial lawsuit involving stolen intellectual property. Claire must have thought she hit the jackpot. But before she could process what she'd found, masked intruders burst in, guns drawn. They weren't after Clara, they were after me. And thanks to Richard's foresight, I had a plan ready. I'd always known this day might come. Richard had built the panic room years ago, hidden behind a bookshelf in my study. As soon as I heard the intruder's heavy boots pounding through my house, I pressed the concealed button and slipped inside, locking the door behind me. Clara was still in the living room, frozen in shock, holding the documents she'd taken from the safe. "What do we do?" she whispered to me, her voice trembling. For once she didn't sound smug or entitled, just scared. "You stay quiet," I hissed back. "And let me handle this." The room was soundproof, but I could see everything on the security monitors. Two men moved methodically through the house, their faces obscured by masks. They weren't amateurs. This wasn't about petty theft, it was about control. Once inside the panic room, I wasted no time. I pulled out my satellite phone, a device even Victor said was overkill, and dialed his number. "It's happening," I told him without preamble. He didn't ask questions, he knew better. Within minutes, he remotely activated the house's secondary defenses. Blinding strobe lights in every room, screeching alarms that would disorient anyone inside, and a silent alert sent directly to the local sheriff's department. Meanwhile, I instructed Clara to keep her head down and not make a sound. She nodded frantically, clutching the papers like they were her lifeline. For all her bravado earlier, she looked small now, cowering in the corner of my panic room. Good. Maybe fear would teach her something humility never could. The intruders didn't expect resistance. When the strobe lights flared and the alarms blared, they stumbled around blindly, shouting curses at each other. It gave me just enough time to trigger the final failsafe. Steel shutters slamming down over all the windows and doors, sealing them inside. Through the monitor, I watched as one of them tried to smash his way out with a crowbar, only to realize it was futile. By then, red and blue lights were flashing outside. The police arrived faster than I'd anticipated, thanks to Victor tipping them off anonymously. As officers stormed the house, guns drawn, I allowed myself a small smile. Richard's contingency plans had worked perfectly. Now came the hard part, figuring out who sent these men and why. After the authorities hauled the intruders away, Clara finally spoke. Her voice shook as she admitted everything. How she'd enlisted Ethan to hack into my devices, how she'd convinced herself that exposing my secret would somehow justify her own greed. "I thought you were hiding something big," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I swear." Part of me wanted to laugh at her naivety. Did she really think breaking into my house and stealing private documents wouldn't have consequences? Still, there was a raw honesty in her confession that made me pause. Perhaps beneath all her materialism and ambition, Clara was just another lost soul searching for validation. I sighed and leaned back against the wall. "You've caused enough trouble for one lifetime," I said. "Now it's time to clean up your mess." A few hours later, Victor showed up at my doorstep. He flew in from London as soon as he heard what happened, bringing with him his trademark calm demeanor and a suitcase full of gadgets. Clara gawked at him openly. He was tall, distinguished, and exuded an air of quiet authority that commanded respect. "This isn't the first time someone's come after Martha's assets," Victor explained matter-of-factly as he examined the damage to my house. "But it's the closest they've ever gotten." Together, we reviewed the evidence left behind by the intruders. Partial fingerprints, fragments of encrypted communication, and a logo embossed on one of their jackets. A symbol I vaguely recognized from Richard's old files. Whoever orchestrated this attack had deep pockets and deeper connections. And they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. By dawn, Victor and I had pieced together enough information to identify the organization behind the attack. A shadowy syndicate operating under the guise of a legitimate tech firm. They specialized in acquiring valuable intellectual property by any means necessary, including intimidation and violence. According to Victor, they believed Richard's early work in cryptocurrency development held secrets worth billions. But they underestimated me. With Victor's help, I transferred my remaining funds to an offshore account so secure even the syndicate couldn't trace them. Then, using a decoy transaction, we lured their operatives into a trap set by Interpol agents tipped off by Victor. Watching the news report later, I felt a grim satisfaction. Justice may be slow, but it's rarely blind. In the weeks that followed, life in Camden slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such chaos. I decided it was time to leave this place behind. Too many memories lingered here, too many reminders of Richard and the life we'd built together. Selling the house wasn't difficult. Buyers were eager to snap it up despite its recent history. Clara stopped by one last time before I left, looking sheepish but sincere. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "For everything." Surprisingly, I believed her. People can change if given the chance. Before I boarded the plane to Switzerland, I handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a USB drive labeled, "For emergencies only." "Don't open it unless you absolutely need to," I advised. "And remember, money changes everything, but secrets destroy." Months passed and I settled into a cozy chalet nestled in the Swiss Alps. Life here was peaceful, almost idyllic. Yet sometimes late at night I wondered about Clara. Had she opened the drive yet? What would she find when she did? The files contained detailed instructions for accessing a portion of my remaining assets, but only if she solved a series of puzzles tied to Richard's legacy. Each clue required patience, intelligence, and a willingness to look beyond surface appearances. I hoped it would challenge her to grow, to become someone worthy of inheriting even a fraction of what I'd protected for so long. After all, wealth is meaningless without wisdom. Back in Maine, Clara sat alone in her now empty mansion. Greg had filed for divorce, taking the kids with him. The parties had stopped, the laughter faded. All that remained was silence, and the USB drive sitting on her kitchen table. He stared at it for hours, debating whether to plug it in. Curiosity eventually won out. As the files loaded onto her computer, she realized this wasn't just a gift. It was a test. Each puzzle forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself. Her greed, her selfishness, her misplaced priorities. At first, frustration consumed her. But gradually, determination took hold. For the first time in years, Clara felt alive. Not because of money, but because she was learning to earn it. One snowy afternoon, I received a letter postmarked from Maine. It was from Clara. Her handwriting was shaky but earnest. "Thank you," she wrote, "for trusting me enough to give me a second chance. I don't know if I'll ever solve all the puzzles, but I promise to try. And I promise to use whatever I find wisely." Enclosed was a photograph of her smiling hesitantly, surrounded by stacks of books about finance and technology. Something stirred inside me, a mix of pride and hope. Maybe Clara Bennett wasn't beyond redemption after all. Sitting by the fire with Max curled up at my feet, I thought about Richard. He'd always believed in leaving the world better than he found it. In my own way, I hoped I was honoring that legacy. Money is fleeting, but knowledge endures. By giving Clara the tools to succeed, and the responsibility to wield them wisely, I was passing on more than wealth. I was passing on a lesson. That true power lies not in hoarding riches, but in sharing them with those who deserve it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time I felt at peace. Just as I began unpacking boxes in my new home, there was a knock at the door. Standing on my porch was none other than Clara herself, bundled in a thick coat and scarf. "I had to come," she said breathlessly, "to thank you in person." We spent the afternoon talking, sharing stories of our pasts and dreams for the future. For the first time I saw Clara not as a threat but as a kindred spirit. Someone who, like me, had been shaped by loss and longing. As the sun dipped below the mountains, casting golden light across the snow, I realized something profound. Sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who remind us of our humanity. As Clara prepared to leave, she glanced at the USB drive tucked safely in her bag. "Do you think I'll figure it all out?" she asked hesitantly. I smiled. "That depends on you," I replied. But remember, the journey matters more than the destination. She nodded, her expression resolute. Before stepping onto the plane back to America, she turned to wave one last time. Watching her go, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of our story. Somewhere, buried in those puzzles, lay answers neither of us could predict. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. Life in the Alps suited me. Days stretched lazily, filled with walks in the crisp mountain air and quiet evenings reading by the fire. Yet part of me remained vigilant, aware that the shadows of the past might one day return. Still, I trusted in the choices I'd made, in protecting what mattered most and in trusting others with the potential to grow. As I sipped my morning tea, gazing out at the snow-capped peaks, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready. After all, I'd learned long ago that the greatest strength comes not from wealth or secrets, but from resilience, courage, and faith in the possibility of renewal.